Hello, listeners. We are your co-hosts, Janine Bailey and Marie Quigley, for the Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast. Empower World brings guests who are making a difference to the world to inspire coaches and leaders who lead with mind, heart, and soul. Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast. And I am so delighted to be here today with my wonderful friend, colleague, co-supervisor, many other titles, Paul Sanbar. So, Paul, welcome to our podcast. I'm really delighted that you're here. I'm going to hand over to you in a moment to introduce yourself. I do want to share with our audience how we first met, which is actually through our coach supervision training quite a few years ago now. So we went through that training together, we graduated together, and now we do some work together in various different spaces and places. So, and Paul, you are a certified hands-on thinking coach with Lego Serious Play. And I was always curious about that. And I know I've worked with you online with Lego, but I had the opportunity to actually do your training in London, which was fantastic. It was such a great experience. And I haven't played with Lego since probably, I'm going to say teens, maybe before that. But it was
just a couple months ago.
Yeah. Just a couple of months ago, I played with it actually in your training, and it was just, it was such a delight. And yes, it was fun and creative, and I'm a creative type of person, so I love using my hands, creating things. And it was also very powerful in terms of coaching for me. I had the opportunity to coach using Lego and to be coached. So both of those were amazing experiences. And what I found when I was coached was I came in with a query, a challenge, stroke opportunity where I felt really stuck in terms of a decision. I did all my usual go-to things to coach myself, to also get other perspectives, to be coached, and I was still stuck. But actually, that Lego training, being coached, enabled me to use my hands to create and build out my thoughts and to create what I desire. So, my aspirations when facing this difficult decision. So I became unstuck. I became free. So very delighted to introduce Paul Sanbar. I've spoken way too much. Paul, love to hand over to you to introduce yourself, and I know you'll do that in a very creative way.
Thank you so much, very much, Janine. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to share my passion for purposeful play, specifically with hands-on thinking, and specifically that part with Lego and this beautiful gift called Lego Serious Play, and my adaptation to it, which is specifically going and using it in one-on-one conversations, whether as a coach or as a supervisor. And of course, I love the one-to-many conversations with teams and groups, but as a coach and as previously as a psychotherapist, it's those intimate one-on-one conversations that really gets my bricks bouncing, if you will. And so, of course, how could I not introduce myself without using a Lego artifact? One, to anchor myself in the here and now, but also to be able to tell a story about where I come from and where I'm going. And so you'll see here, there's this artifact has two parts, and for those of you listening, I'm going to explain it a bit. On this bottom part is the Paul of me that is so important because it informs so much of what's happening in the top part of this artifact. But the truth is that you'll see these red and blue and green bricks in this very structured, very symmetrical type of way. The way what that represents is where I come from. Quite honestly, I come from a place of with lots of chaos, to be honest. And we know from psychology for young people, and even in the more the more chaos, the more things that we can't control outside of us as young people, the more we try to control ourselves or try to control, and it's just out of a sense of safety. And so what you'll see these very structured bottom parts is, a little bit of sadness, some blue, a good amount of this anxiety that I had with me as I tried to become as I became a young adult and as a professional. And so you'll see this bottom part of me, and you'll see a younger me there with a microphone. The way I learned to heal myself is through writing, taking a lot of this stuff and performing it. And actually, part of why I was so happy to go back to London, to go back to the Shoreditch area, is because this Paul here is a Paul that used to roam the streets of Hoxton and Shoreditch area performing poetry some almost 30 years ago now. Um, and so that's the Paul that struggled, but also realized that he had a gift, and then he wanted to share it with the world. He just didn't quite know how. But then I kept sharing, and this top Paul is what created out of it. This you see here now is me. And I'm standing here with my guiding light, this eyeball shooting into the sky, with this big idea that I have that I like to stand next to. And this is a coaching client here, looking out this window into possibilities with their own ideas booming out of their head, and this great idea off to the side that they have for themselves that I can't touch, I can't change for them, but I can stand up alongside them and remind them of their gifts, and remind them that if they look out into the possibilities, if they look down into their past, not so deeply, but into the parts of what parts of that worked, what part do you want to carry on with you, then they can reach the heights that I feel like I've created for myself. And so this artifact kind of encapsulates the two chapters of my life, and the fact that I would not be in this wonderful chapter if not for having to learn and grow in this chapter. And so that's me. And I kind of like where I'm standing right now.
Thank you so much, Paul, for sharing. And for those who can't see, Paul has built, as he calls, an artifact, a Lego build, which you aptly call an artifact, of himself on a foundation, a wall of bricks on both sides, and then there's another second or first floor. So it does look more structured, that bottom piece, and the top piece looks from this perspective free. It does look free.
Yeah. And that's how I feel. And that's what to me is so powerful um about building using our hands, and allowing, because I didn't know what I was building when I started. When I train people in this method, or when I facilitate, I often say, if you don't know where to start, let your hands be your guide. So I didn't know what I was building when I built it. But now when I look at it, of course I know exactly what I was building, because as I say, we're meaning seeking creatures. Whatever there is out there in the world, we want to apply meaning to it, because if it has meaning, then we have meaning. And even more so, when we build it on our own, oh goodness, it has a visceral meaning that when I look at it, I see myself, and I see and I see all the parts of me that allow me to become me, the me that I really like this younger me, from the perspective of the current me. but but back then it was I had to have a lot of I had to keep a lot of things in order to feel okay. And now things can just go wherever they need to because I'm okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh, I really again appreciate you sharing your artifact, Paul, and sharing and introducing yourself. And as you've done that, I just get a real sense of joy. Um, I'm aware of the energy and the smile as you speak, and that there's just a whole lot of energy that I'm sensing as you share your story about Mini Paul or Mini Pauls.
Yeah, all the different parts of me that make me me. And I guess that's part of this work that does come from Gestalt psychology, where we think about the whole, right? The whole artifact, but we also can look at the parts of the artifact. And so you know, when we do this work, we can ask people about the whole perspective of what they see and what they've created, but also the parts. To what part of that do you want to keep? What part of that would you like to build upon top of? What part of that would you like to let go of? Those are those are the type of questions that quite honestly, we may ask in coaching conversations without Lego, but when we ask them with Lego, I often talk about this idea of coaching having three spaces, a triangle, whatever it may be. There's the coach, there's a client, and there's that space between us, and that's the client space. They get to own it. It's their journey, and we are allowed to walk with them and be with them in that space on their journey when they build part of themselves. So when they build themselves and they show us, we get to not only see what they're thinking and what they're feeling, but they also get to see what they're thinking and feeling, and we can be curious about it. And so I can ask that question, what part of that belongs? And it makes total sense to the client because we're both looking, which is why I have this big window picture here. We're both looking out the same window. And and I share with or without Lego, as a coach, our questions become more incisive. We can become even better coaches when we're really able to see out the client's window. And that's what Lego allows us to really do, is to quite literally see what they're thinking, what they're saying, and most importantly, what they're feeling and sensing into.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. And we talked earlier about how Lego really, or the artifact represents it's a metaphor,
Yeah.
uh, and of course, most coaches, I'm trusting, work with metaphors when working with their clients,
Yeah.
as it's such a powerful way to support our clients. And I guess the thing that makes Lego so powerful, as you say, it's a not guess. I'm going to say I know, perhaps because I've experienced it. Uh,
Experienced it.
yeah, that it is something physical that, as you say, we can look at, we can touch it, we can continue to create, and we can carry that artifact around with us, um, and utilize it in any shape, way, or form, particularly in the coaching space. Um, so, Paul, from your perspective, what makes Lego Serious Play coaching,
Yeah.
like with Lego Serious Play, or maybe it's just coaching with Lego? You can you can confirm.
Whoever it may be. We can play with the words.
Mm, because of course we know that Lego is being used to facilitate work,
Sure.
etc., etc. But your focus is really on coaching. Is
Yeah.
what's the the power or importance or the significance of coaching with Lego?
Sure. Yeah. So Lego Serious Play, for anybody that knows it a little bit or you've heard of it or you've never heard it before, it is this as I say, one to many methodology. Think of it more as an organizational development and culture tool, right? And it is fantastic and I love it. And it mainly has been used for teams and groups and organizations. And as I said, my passion really is in those more intimate, slower, reflective conversations with one-on-one clients, whether as a coach or as a supervisor. Don't get me wrong. I love working with teams, and I really love that slower, iterative pace that happens when you're working with a single person. And so the difference is that it is slower and it is more iterative. And this other part, the minifigure. And so if you saw it, you saw these little mini people at minifigure Paul, or in this case, there was multiple Pauls, right? The multiple parts of my life, of my journey. This notion that the minifigure has deep resonance for that client and even when I have my training or when I start with a client, I actually have lots of different minifigure parts, different heads, different hats, different hair, different skin tones, different ambulatory abilities, because I want them to see themselves in the minifigure, because coaching in my mind has we have two different conversations that are happening. Coaching gives us the opportunity to look from a dissociated view of what is happening, right? Coaching being that productive pause to step outside of of that conversation that we were about to have, or that desire that we want to be in, to step outside and to look at it, the whole parts, all the connecting parts of that system, and to be able to associate into that thing that we're working on, or that conversation that we want to have, and to be able to see through our own eyes. And for some people, that is being able to shift between those two things. For some people, that's really easy. Some people might find it a little more challenging to do that. And we know when we're able to in a coaching session shift those perspectives. You mentioned perspective shifts at the beginning, and I happen to believe that all coaching, we know as coaches, we don't change the client. We just give them an opportunity to look at the same thing with a new set of eyes. So that's what this work does. And when you use the minifigure to ask two types of questions, and I tell the client, and when I do the training, I say, "Okay, tell your client you're going to ask them two different kinds of questions. I'm going to ask you, client, a question. I'll use your name, Janine. I'm going to ask you questions. And I'm going to also be curious about what minifigure Janine is feeling and thinking and even seeing from inside of the artifact." And so that, to me, and this notion of this much more iterative process, coaching being this journey, there's a destination. It may not be a physical one, right? Sometimes it is, right? I physically want to get there in life. Most often it's this evolutionary, or this shift in thinking, in being. And so this journey, this way that the framework works, is that we just get really curious about what is, the artifact of what is, and we learn about what parts are working, and the parts that we value, and the parts that we wish weren't there, but we know we know that's a part of us. We just wish it maybe was. We wish maybe the brick was a little bit smaller, if you will, to be a bit figurative. And then we just ask, well, what would you like to see? How would you like for what you created? How would you like for it to evolve? And better yet, how what does minifigure Janine in this scenario, what do they think needs to change in this shift between both the dissociated view of the system and associated into the system, and this notion of using these wonderful tools at the end of our arms to iterate, to think with our hands and use the wisdom of our embodied cognition to just move a brick and see how it feels. And though that statement, see how it feels, this connection. And if it feels right, it looks right. And if it looks right, it feels right. And if it doesn't, guess what? It's Lego. We can pull it off and see where else we might want to place it so it feels right.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you say, it's a playful process. And it really does support that disassociation
Yeah.
from what is potentially happening or what could happen. But it's like the view from the dance floor perspective. But
Yeah.
built into that is using hands.
Yeah.
So, and I know there's a science behind that, Paul,
Sure.
that that connection with our mind through to our hands, and you could probably say it more articulately than myself. Do you want to share more about that?
Sure. I mean, there is a lot of science to it, and I can spend the next 20 minutes talking about it, or I can just simply say, one, I also want to acknowledge that this is an ableist tool. Not everybody has the finger dexterity and the ability to use their hands. And so I'm aware that not everybody can do this. But if you can, and if you do have that, if you do have the ability to use your hands, just think about what you were able to create from the moment you woke up to the moment you're listening or watching this. Think about what your hands have allowed you to do. There's so much knowledge. And also, I guess, think about what your hands did without you even thinking. Of course, you're thinking, but there's parts of you that your hands have so much knowledge, and that when we tap into that knowledge, because yes, so much of the work that we do and all of our work with our clients is from the neck up, from that prefrontal cortex ability to think and do all these things. But there is so much knowledge that lies in the wisdom of our body and specifically of our hands. And so, as I say, if you don't know where to start, let your hands be your guide. They know things that you might not yet know, and trust that they might teach you a few things in this process. And that's where the play comes in, right? Allowing, and of course, we're looking at Lego, and Lego comes from our youth. Many of us have played with them. And so we can't help but step into that possibility, wonder, and awe mindset that we had when we were 9 years old, when we were playing with these bricks, because we're doing it again at 20, 39, or 49, or whatever nine or any other number you may be at the end of your age. And so that's what happens when you use your hands, the wisdom in there, and also when you step into play, into possibilities. And the last part about this is because the bricks, because they all connect, because because there's an ease once you learn the bricks, there's an ease with which you can make connections. It allows you to to step into that innovative, the wisdom, the part of your intelligence that's like, let's just try this out. And as I go back to and see if it feels right. And if it does, awesome. And then we say, how can you become, you client, how can you become what you see? Taking it from the session to the parallel process of taking it outside of the session and having them really embody what that artifact that they created with their hands.
Yeah, beautifully articulated. And the experts say that our unconscious mind lives in our body, so it is a powerful way to support the unlocking of the wisdom that is there, the
Yeah.
unconscious blind spots.
Right. Right. And coaching is just about, when you find a coach that you trust, is just about giving in to people come to us because they're like, I've tried this and I've tried that and it's not quite working. So how else can we do it? Right. And we know, as coaches know, well, you know, I I bet you there's a part of you that knows how to do this. And let me help create that space with you that will allow you to trust that part, to allow it to come to fruition. And for me, um, Lego expedites that process a little bit, because it allows us to see it. It allows us to make it tangible. And the other wonderful gift, and I have lots of coaching clients who will go take that action right away. And I have clients that, struggle with taking that action, or whatever it may be, whether it's a behavior or a thinking change or just even an experiment. And when we build an artifact, when we build our thoughts and we have them there, that final question of, well, as you leave here today and you look at what you created, what is it sharing back to you? And if that artifact would be somewhere in the world, at your home or your office or whatever it may be, where would you like for it to be, to remind you of that resonant statement that you just said? And so what happens with this is that the session carries on longer than when we click end Zoom meeting, or we say goodbye if we happen to be lucky to have an in-person session, because that artifact persists, right? Words fade, but artifacts persist. And when we imbue our thoughts and feelings and desires, and even our goal of who we want to become, and when we imbue it into those bricks, they don't go anywhere. And hopefully that resonant statement is a kind, gentle one that is just nudging us towards who we want to become. And whenever we look back on that story, we can say, yeah, that's who and what I'm working towards. And it can talk back to me too. A little we'll say very playful. But when I train people, I say ask questions of the bricks, and be curious what the bricks might be saying back to you. And of course, we know we're just asking questions of ourselves and projecting it onto the artifact. But when it is outside of us and we can see it, we may be able to better be clear about and hear better what it's saying back to us.
Yeah, beautiful. Again, beautifully said, Paul. You've for those who can't see, you've held up your artifact, and so if your artifact could speak to you right now in this moment,
Yes.
what would your artifact say?
Hmm. In fact, it wouldn't just say it, it would do it. I in my hand at the top of me is a light that I currently had, at my waist height. And what it is telling me, and I raise it up even higher up to the sky, it what it is telling me is it's saying, Paul, raise that light, get even louder, even though you struggle to to push to feel like you're being a bit you're telling rather than listening, but it's telling me raise raise it up and maybe even shout a bit in the coming year. Ooh. I'm gonna have to have a conversation with him because that's already bringing up bringing up some feelings in my gut that some bricks that are rumbling as I think about that.
Well, I'm super curious now. But what's happening? I won't ask the questions on the podcast, but there's so many. So hopefully you can hear, listeners, the opportunities to ask questions. I'm noticing Paul's physiology. I'm noticing his laugh and his big smile. I heard him talking about the rumbling of bricks in his belly. There's so many different types of questions we could ask about what's happening for you right now.
It's
And
that shared language. That shared language that happens, right? When you can see what I'm saying, your questions, the questions can become shorter, more concise, but more incisive, right? That's to me what's so powerful and why I'm biased, but I say, I think it's actually easier to coach with Lego than without because because the bricks are like, here's a question. And they almost shout to you like, ask me this, ask them that.
yeah, and again, I feel very inspired to get curious about what's coming up. However, we are on a podcast.
Yeah.
But again, I'm trusting that the listeners can hear the ease of getting curious about the different parts that are going on within the artifact itself, but also your response, Paul, the real Paul,
Yeah.
not the mini Paul, the artifact Paul. So again, as Paul has shared, it just helps. It really assists asking incisive questions and powerful questions at that.
Yeah.
Paul, I want to thank you so much for sharing your passion and your absolute joy with using Lego, and how it could be used so powerfully and playfully and really support clients to create incredible awareness. And I can absolutely reinforce that for myself, my own experience. So thank you, Paul. If people want to find out more, where can they find you?
Yeah, the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. And that's LinkedIn Paul Sanbar. And also there on certified hands-on thinking coach, which is a place where I share more about this methodology, of course, more about how to find the trainings in person and virtual, and just more about um my passion for using this communication technology as a vehicle for people to develop themselves, or to become that person that they want to be, or to become the coach that uses different ways and different tools that are going to support their clients. So see me around LinkedIn. That's usually the best place to find me.
And we'll also have contact details for you in the blurbs to describe our podcast. So do look out for those if you want to get in contact with Paul. Paul, again, I'm so hugely grateful for your time here today. And, I'm really aware that you are a trailblazer with the coaching one-on-one with Lego. So really appreciate your time and generosity.
A pleasure to always pleasure to play in spaces with you, Janine.
And likewise. Thank you, Paul.
Cheers.
All the very best. Thank you, listeners. And we'd love you to share this podcast if you got value, if you know that others would be interested in hearing and finding out more about coaching with Lego. So thank you, listeners. And we look forward to your company next time.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening. You can find out more about us on our website www.empower-world.com and on our social media networks Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. Be empowered.